And those fines, not cheap. They range from $250 all the way to $1,500. Big time. Here to talk about all this, Quentin Brogdon, attorney, legal expert. Always good to get your analysis. Quentin, good morning.
Good morning, Brian. Nice to visit with you again.
All right, so let's talk about this. We got these huge fines that can range up to $1,500 that are to be imposed by the TSA. First thought, Quentin, when you're talking about something like fines and the federal government, it's kind of tough. It's not the most efficient way for them to be issued. What is the likelihood that somebody gets fined first and foremost by the transit authorities, whether you're taking a plane, a train, bus, what have you?
Well, we've seen these fines be imposed by some states and some local municipalities, and the trend is that not that many people actually get issued the citations and have to pay them. Usually what ends up happening is people get warned on the first occasion, but the fines give the authorities a way to do this. I think the bigger question is how this was done. President Biden did this through an executive order. Executive orders are not specifically provided for in the Constitution for presidents to do it, but presidents have issued these orders, presidents of both parties. Obama issued, I think, 270-something of them, and President Trump himself issued over 200 of them. And so they can be subject to judicial review if they run afoul of at least what's implied within the Constitution and the statutes that Congress has passed, because the president, when they issue, any president says, well, I'm determining how to enforce the law. I'm not necessarily making new law. That's what presidents of both parties say when they issue these orders. You know, Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation was an executive order, for instance. So they've been used for a long time.
Yeah.
But I think every president, except maybe one, has used executive orders.
Well, let's take a look at, the legality behind it. You lay out very well that, this is an executive action. The question in all these actions, are they legal? Since you have what's being impacted, what's regulated by the TSA, that they fall into the privilege category. In other words, you don't have a constitutional right to fly on a plane. You don't have a constitutional right to travel on a train or to travel by bus. Therefore, given that it's a privilege, you do as we say, or else you pay this type of consequence, anywhere from $250 to $1,500. Is that an accurate depiction of the legal argument for this?
Sure, and the federal government has always argued, and the cases have supported it, that they have a special role in regulating and passing laws and regulations about interstate commerce. So this involves traveling between states, traveling on buses between states, rail stations, etc. The reality is, for most people, this isn't going to change what their experience is. Airlines were already enforcing mask wearing, for instance, on their own and
right.
putting people on no-fly lists. But airlines probably prefer to be able to say, well, the government is making us do this, even though the airlines were doing it on their own before, all the airlines.
Yeah, it definitely gives the companies that operate within these industries, some of the cover that way. I get that. My question then comes down to, okay, let's say to your point, and I did analysis on this recently, only in the neighborhood of 500 fines were issued in Miami-Dade County last year when there was the ability for the local governments to be able to impose those fines before Governor DeSantis issued an order in September putting an end to it. So it is pretty rare. What's the likelihood that the federal government is going to be able to successfully collect on these fines?
Not good. You have to track down folks, and we see from the criminal system in states, my home state of Texas, for instance, when a judge or a jury assesses a fine against a criminal, oftentimes those end up not being collected. In theory, you can do jail time for at least some of these things for not paying those fines. But the reality is often they do not end up getting paid or collected. That is correct.
Appreciate it. It's a good update. Quentin Brogdon, again, legal analyst, and always good information. And kind of goes in the bucket of what I've been talking about with Governor DeSantis and Florida. On one hand, I understand the local governments that want to be able to still impose the mask fines. That being said, if you talk about, behavior itself, how much of a difference are you really making, and how many fines were really issued when you were given the opportunity? probably be even more exacerbated once the federal government trying to do this. All right, we'll be right back at the Brian Mudd Show, News Radio 610 WIOD.